Erika, Peter, Marlot, are you ready for this? Have you met each other before? I don't know. Erika and Peter, of course, have met, but Marlot, maybe not so. I think you will like each other. So I will bring up the slides and then properly introduce you all. But it's super exciting to have you all here. And I hope I can do a better job keeping people on time. So it's really a matter of doing a brief introduction of your research and then opening the floor to discussion and getting also attendees to ask questions. I know there are some people you also know in the audience. And we would love to have you, just ask each other questions ultimately also. So when we created the topic of the third iteration of the exhibit, we of course also went out and tried to understand, okay, what is known about how you can measure intelligence. And of course, I looked over to cognitive science, which is very strong here at Indiana University. I looked over to psychology to try to see how can we measure human intelligence. But then there's so much other intelligence out there, including the microbiome, which I needed to digest the wonderful lunch I had today, including trees and fungi, which do a lot of really interesting interactions with each other, or viruses and bacteria, which exchange genetic materials to communicate, right? So how do you actually define intelligence? What types of intelligence are there? And we thought, well, you are the team here. And so I will bring up the slides because I think everybody should see those. But I will also bring up where we are in the overall event. And so I will share my screen here. And we just went through the 12 o'clock session, and we are now in the 1 p.m. panel on intelligence type with Meyer from Hotspot from the Royal Academy of Art in The Hague in the Netherlands. And then Erika, Amanda Cartmill, and Peter Todd, right here from Indiana University, because I'm familiar with their work and I thought they would be a great fit, and they fortunately said yes. But Marlot's work I actually encountered in Halle at one of these Science Spark festivals, and I was just absolutely fascinated. And I thought, oh my God, it would be great if we could get her here. And she said yes. It's just wonderful. So let me move over to the slide deck. And let's start with a brief introduction of our panelists and also of their work, and then go over to the discussion. So here we have the slide, and Marlot is first. She was born and raised in South Africa. I got the chance to visit there once. It's a very different world. I really liked being there. And then went to the Netherlands, and the Netherlands has a very interesting way to support art. There are amazing science museums. If you have not been to Micropia in Amsterdam, or many of the museums in Leiden and other places, it's just super cool museums. And I think it takes government resources to have these kind of museums, and the Netherlands has the foresight to spend that money. So here you also see her biography, and maybe in the interest of time, I just give it over to you, Marlot, and feel free to say a few words about yourself and also how it relates to this entire ambition to visualize intelligences, because you must have done this to a certain degree to just optimize the setup, to understand the data that's coming in, and to ultimately give users the best experience and the most actionable knowledge, so that they maybe think differently, act differently in their lives. So again, thanks for joining us all.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm really glad you got to experience the work Hotspot. And just a short introduction. So I am an artist and also a tutor at the Royal Academy of Art, which I also studied at. And we can go to the next slide. And I think the main question in my practice that I'm trying to answer is, how can I show the interconnection between people, environments, or systems? And actually, more importantly, how can I let people experience or communicate through these connections? So I was thinking about, okay, intelligence types, it's an interesting topic or theme. And I was thinking, okay, if I had to define which intelligence type I'm working with, we can go to the next slide. It would probably be embodied intelligence. So my whole practice, I think, focuses around the body. And we can go to the next slide. Yeah, not just the body that we think about, but I also think about the body as an interconnected, interdependent thing which carries knowledge through lived experience, through engaging and resonating with the environment, and this body that is, really entangled and embedded in a world also has the ability to tap into other forms of intelligence by sensing and kind of relating to other beings and to themselves. So we can go to the next one. And I think what was quite interesting is growing up in South Africa, I guess I really felt, I don't know, I had a strong connection to environment and nature and to my body. And then coming to Holland, I felt that there was quite a difference. And I also studied interactive media design, which is a lot about technology. And I kind of got quite frustrated or started seeing a lot of friction between, let's say, my image of this interconnected, embodied human experience and what a lot of technology and information and even human language does, which is basically disconnect the body or like the sensing body from the mind or from logical thinking. And I felt like, this is maybe not the best way to do it. So we can go to the next slide. And the whole thing with like working with information and working with a lot of technologies and a lot of science tries to basically know the world by observing it as if they're like an outsider, observing the world. And I think, yeah, unless you're at the space station, it's not possible to know the world as an outsider, because we know the world by being in the world, being embedded in it. So we can go to the next one. Yes, and so I really do believe that technology does have this potential to remind and reinforce these relations we have with the world, because it's able to sense things that maybe we can't perceive. It's able to translate things into perceptible things for us to understand. And I think in that way, yeah, it can actually work as a tool to remind us that these connections or these relationships exist. So, for example, in my work, Hotspot, if we go to the next one. So this is the one that Katy experienced. And if we go to the next one. So it's an interactive installation where I was really interested in thinking about how to create a form of non-verbal communication between bodies, because basically, like I was saying, technology, but I also think language to a certain extent limits the way we understand the world or the way we relate to the world, because language is very much focused on defining things or like naming things, and therefore also separating things. And because language also kind of influences how we think and perceive the world, I thought, okay, let's see if we can use technology and biosensors to basically let bodies speak to each other without needing to use language. So we can go to the next one. So basically, it's a group experience where people put on these yellow octopus headsets, and these collect biodata. So they collect your sweat response, your prefrontal cortex activity, your horizontal eye movement, and your heart rate. And I chose these things because altogether, I think they could tell a lot about how someone is feeling, like their emotional state of being. So when you're excited, you sweat a little bit and your heart rate goes faster. If you're calm, the prefrontal cortex activity will be at a different frequency. So anyway, so I collected all of these data points from participants. And what happens is this gets translated into electrical stimulation that's delivered to all the other participants. So basically, if we were in an experience together, I would be feeling on my body the translation of all the other participants' bodies, and they would be feeling me. Which of course, in the end, also creates a bit of a feedback loop because it's quite exciting, maybe a bit scary for people to be feeling each other like this. So then maybe their heart rate goes up and then it kind of creates a feedback loop. I would love to hear later what Katy thought of the experience. But for now, we'll move on. So this one was really focused on, creating a relationship between bodies. But I've also done some works which are more focused on creating a relationship with a natural force or something that maybe we didn't have a relationship to before. So in Project Tidal, I was in this area in the Netherlands next to the Waddenzee, which is like the largest undisrupted or like unbroken tidal flat in the world. And there's a lot of difference between high and low tide, but at the same time, there's rising sea levels, and there is a lot of fear that the land will be taken away there. So the people there want to build higher barriers. And I thought, why not see, instead of trying to keep the sea out, why can we not try to let the sea in again? And so my goal here was to see how I could create an experience and basically an adaptation of my body with the changing tides. So we can go to the next one. So I put some sensors in the mud where basically the water would rise and fall, and eventually got it stable enough to collect some data so I could see when it was high and low tide. And then I sent that via radio to inflatable vest that would basically inflate when it was high tide and deflate when it was low tide. And in the end of the process, I had this on for about 2 weeks. I also slept with it on. And then what was quite interesting was what happened with my relationship with this strange thing that I was wearing, because kind of by accident, it ended up looking a little bit like a baby. And when it was high tide, it was very inflated and it was kind of difficult to walk. And I had to be careful, not to walk against sharp or hot things. And this weird relationship started forming where I really had like, I don't know, like a maternal instinct. And I think what's interesting that this project shows is kind of how you could create, let's say, a very human or a very personal relationship with something that is generally quite difficult or like not graspable, such as like the tides of the sea. Like it's a very large thing and it's very difficult to, I don't know, create a personal relationship with something like that. And so if we go to the next slide, so what I wanted to do after this whole experience and this research is figure out how to share this with an audience. Obviously, an audience doesn't have 2 weeks to wear a vest sometimes. So I tried to see how can I, yeah, transform it into an experience for the public. So I created the work Noma. And basically, this work, there's like these very large inflatable creatures and these small little creatures that people put on. We can go to the next one. So these were actually inspired by diatoms, which are in the mud where I was. And these are like these microalgae that wiggle themselves up when it's low tide and wiggle down when it's high tide. And when you take them to the lab, apparently they still move with the tides. And I found it very interesting that these tiny things create, I think it's like 20 to 50% of the world's oxygen every year. Anyway, so those are those giant creatures. And the idea was that if we go to the next one, I wanted to link the idea of the tides and the ebb and flow of the tides with the idea of human breath being also like a tide. The inhalation and exhalation is very much like the high and low tide. So basically, these small little creatures that people are wearing. Oh, I don't have permission. Okay, well, that's fine. These little creatures that people are wearing measure their breath, their inhalation and exhalation. And then the larger creatures in the space, there's like parents that correspond to the small vests, babies that the people are wearing, and they basically resonate with the breath of the participants. And what I realized with this one, which was quite interesting, was that people really saw it as a kind of practice in how to communicate also with like a non-human creature being. And they really created, yeah, this kind of relationship and a sort of training space for training to really use your breath to communicate to these beings. And that's about it. That's all I have to say, I guess. Well, I mean, this is where the end of the slide is, but I think, yeah, the question the question I have for the people at the webinar is how can embodied intelligence also work with other types of intelligence, and how can we integrate it more into how we see knowledge and how we think about the production and sharing of knowledge. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Marlot, for sharing this with us. It's super fun and stimulating and thought-provoking, and I think that's what artists are supposed to do, but I think also researchers are supposed to do that, and ultimately we all benefit collectively from a deeper understanding of how we are situated in this world. So again, thank you so very much for guiding us through your trajectory. We are going to come over to Erica. She just recently joined Indiana University, and I'm so glad she did. She runs the Compare Lab at IU and also works very closely with the Indianapolis Zoo, which is an hour north from here, and also with zoos in Europe and Japan. And she, among many other things, she also co-directs the Diverse Intelligences Summer Institute. If you ever get a chance to go there, I think you, Marlot, and I think many others here on the call would really enjoy this. And she chairs the Evolution of Language conference series. So I think we will get to hear a little bit about the evolution of language, maybe also. And there are all kinds of different languages that are different, that different intelligences are using. So they are mighty things. Erica, please take over.
All right. Thank you so much, Katy, for inviting me today. And thanks, Marlo, for the really fascinating presentation. I hate going after artists because it's like so interesting. And then I'm like, let's talk about some science. But it's really wonderful. And I think in many ways, what I want to talk about connects with some of the ideas that you brought up, because I'm really interested in embodiment, sort of entangled interaction, the like situatedness and dynamicness of nonverbal communication. But I'm very interested in the non-human. And so I have done some work with humans, with human children in particular. But the most of my work focuses on non-human great apes, and other animals. So what I wanted to do today was to sort of highlight some of the struggles that I have as a scientist in thinking about ways to bring the dynamic nature of those interactions that I study in my work to different audiences when I'm thinking about, how to communicate about the interactions between animals that I see. So if you can go to the next slide, Katy. This is just really quickly just to show you my lab, mostly because I think the photos are cute. I didn't take them, but they are licensed. Yeah, just to highlight the fact that mostly I work with great apes and children. I'm starting some work with dogs, and I'm very interested. I think there'll be sort of new challenges presented in trying to study, to measure, to analyze, and then ultimately to visualize interaction between dogs and humans. So right now I've really focused on conspecifics, or, two individuals of the same species, either, a child and a parent, or a great ape and another great ape. But I'm very interested with dogs and comparing dog-dog interactions to dog-human interactions. Next slide, please. So this is kind of how I wanted to frame the challenge that I see in my work. Is that I'm fundamentally interested in interactions between more than one individual. And so, these interactions obviously involve more than one individual. They also involve the sort of dynamism between action and reaction. They occur within a specific social relationship. They occur within a specific space and time, and they unfold over time and across space. And so trying to find a way of generalizing from the specific to the general, but also to find a way of visualizing and communicating the dynamic nature of an interaction in, say, a scientific publication or an article for the general public is very difficult. So scientific visualizations are typically static images. They typically focus on averaged data and use graphs or tables. And those are fantastic for illustrating the results, or sorry, illustrating the patterns in the data that the statistics are testing. But they're not great in many cases at sort of giving you a sense, sort of putting you in the room of the interactions that you're observing. Next image, please. So, sorry, I didn't know I couldn't control the slides, Katy, so they're going to be animated. So I just wanted to highlight 4 different strategies that sort of I've attempted in my work to think about visualizing these interactions in different ways. So 1, you can describe an example interaction in text, and this is what happens a lot in anthropology. So that's one of the disciplines that I work in. It's often sort of how an ethnographic talk begins, is you kind of situate the audience, you put them in the room, you describe something as you saw it, and it gives them sort of a little slice, a little snapshot into that lived experience. It also allows you, because you're choosing the text, it allows you to walk people through the key moments and sort of highlight which things you want them to see. Also, sort of describing as much as possible gives people, and giving them one example, gives them the opportunity to kind of see and experience the complexity of that one example. But doesn't highlight the generalizable features, and it ultimately doesn't provide a visualization, which is what we're here to talk about today. So if you can, yeah, thank you. You were doing a great team, Katy. So you can also present a video of an example interaction, or sometimes a composite video of several different sort of highlighted examples. And this is typically what people do. Is great in that it shows people the real data, shows people the real interactions, the animals, shows all the complexity. However, if those people haven't don't have the background that you do as, as a scientist who's familiar with that species, they might not see the same thing that you see, right? So we always do a lot of work with inter-observer reliability. So like if you're a trained coder who's been, because we make sure that we're not just, the thing that I see isn't just there for me, but, that if someone is given instructions and sort of told what to look for, that we make sure that's replicable and, sort of following a recipe that anyone could do it. But if you're just putting a video out there and you say, look and see, you're not able to kind of control the narrative and walk people through in the same way that you do with a selected text. Just like the text, it doesn't highlight the generalizable features. And, most problematically, video isn't always available as an option. So if you're giving a talk, you can certainly show a video, and that's what I typically do. But if you're providing, an article, something in written media, you can provide links, but you can't guarantee people will click on them. Third, you can present video stills in what I think of as sort of a comic strip form. So, you can select out stills from the real video, append them into a comic form. This sort of, the problem is that it's static, can't show the timing, and, it's subject to some of the same critiques as presenting a video of the real of the excuse me, of the example interaction, and that unless you're drawing people's attention to exactly what to look for, it can be difficult using kind of images from the interaction itself. And then fourth, you can create drawings from video stills. In some ways, this is what has been used kind of historically the most frequently. I mean, obviously we didn't have video in, far ago history. But, I think that just in the same way that field guides, there's a big discussion in field guides of animals, whether the illustrated field guides, the drawn ones, are actually better identifying animals than the photographs. That because the drawn images are in many ways idealized. So they're not going to represent any specific bird, for example, but they're representing and oftentimes highlighting the traits that you should look for as someone who's trying to identify a bird. Whereas the photos are providing an example of, Rob the cardinal on a Tuesday in Connecticut. And so in some ways they're more realistic, but they're also less representative. Okay, so I just wanted to really quickly show you an example of each of these strategies applied to my own work. If you go to the next slide. Some of my recent work is focused on studying playful teasing in great apes. So the ways that particularly juveniles are sort of pestering and annoying adults, but in a good-humored way that's often tolerated, sort of it's not full-blown play, but it's something where one individual is essentially annoying the other one, but within a relationship where there's a lot of trust and a lot of, a strong positive relationship. And so the ways in which these interactions play out can tell both individuals in the relationship a lot about the strength of that relationship. And I think it's from a cognitive standpoint, thinking about intelligence, it's a very good way for juvenile individuals to develop an understanding of social relationships and social boundaries. So, yes, exactly. Yeah, right. The illustrated field guides. That's awesome. And so this was a description that I wrote an article earlier this year for Scientific American on this work, and this was the paragraph, the description of the interaction that I started the piece with. I'm just going to read it. I know everyone can read it up here, but so we said, in one sunny afternoon in San Diego, 3-year-old Aisha played outside while her father sat nearby. Her father wasn't paying much attention to her, so Aisha took a toy and waved it at him. When he didn't respond, she redoubled her efforts, gently bonking him on the head with the toy. She looked at her dad's face expectantly, but to no avail. Aisha then waved the toy in her dad's face and brushed it across the top of his head, making it harder and harder for him to ignore her. Finally, he gave in and watched while she swung on a swing. And then, it goes on to say Aisha and her father are orangutans. And I often start sort of general public talks with sort of a narrative like this, where I don't say what species. I mean, I don't usually have a picture of the animal, right? But I'll sort of start with a black screen and read this description, and then I'll be like, haha, surprise, they're not a child and a parent. They're, usually great apes. I was going to say turtles, but I don't know if turtles tease. And I think that pivot is quite, I mean, maybe by now people have gotten tired of it, but I think it's quite fun, because I think it's very easy to kind of project yourself into this interaction. But if you can go to the next one, Katy. I'd like to show a video of that interaction itself. This is actually going to be the third video clip on here, but they're pretty quick. So this was the supplementary materials for a paper that we did on teasing. I guess it's a little, yeah, it's a little hard to show because it's kind of choppy. All right, I don't know if it's going to be. Well, I guess that's one of the issues with video, right? Is if you're trying to show it online, it's not always going to show smoothly. When you sit in person in the room, it is very smooth. You get this infant chimpanzee here running up to his mom, sort of poking her, running back, looking at her, poking her, running back, looking at her. Here you get a juvenile gorilla who comes up and smacks his mom behind the head, and she's like, ah. And it's a very surprising moment. And then here, this is Aisha, and she's teasing her dad with this rope. So she's dangling above him. She swings the rope back and forth in front of his field of vision, and he's ignoring her. And then she starts kind of gently bonking him on top of the head. She bonks him harder. And then eventually she drops down on the rope and swings back and forth. And then he in front of him, and then he starts to pay attention to her. Okay, so Katy, we can move on. So this is an example of kind of extracting moments from a video like that. This is a different interaction. This is what we call an offer and withdrawal game. You can kind of think about it as a psych, right? So it's like, here, take this stick. So you'll see on the sort of going from the top left across the top and then bottom left across the bottom. This is a teasing interaction between two adult orangutans. There's a male behind the mesh on the left, and the female is the one that you can mainly see. And so the male here is extending out a piece of bamboo. The female reaches for it, and he pulls it back at the last second. Then he reaches again. She grabs it with her mouth, pulls it back at the last second. And this interaction went on for more than 10 minutes. So this is a very small snapshot, but kind of illustrating these key moments of offer, reach, withdraw. Okay, next one. And then this is just to illustrate from, I don't usually draw my work with great apes. Because you can show images of great apes and there are no issues of sort of no ethical problems of confidentiality and privacy. But I also work with young children, and there are a lot of issues, and a lot of concerns with revealing identity of your participants. And so when I'm studying the interaction, or these are actually images taken from a paper on iconic gesture. I tried to illustrate a moment from the video and then use arrows to indicate the path through which the hand was moving in illustrating the gesture. Each of those had to be accompanied because, sort of as a snapshot, just as an image, they don't actually give you any of the richness of how embedded they are in an interaction. And so you have to pair those with a text to sort of explain where is this coming and how does the movement actually work. Okay, next one. And then Katy, you can just flip through these quickly, just a couple things at the end, basically to sort of show like pulling up from the specific interaction to the general. These are some of the ways that from the ape teasing, we were trying to to summarize across different interactions. So we were trying to give people a sense of like, what does one look like, so that you could have sort of a sense of like, what is the thing that we're talking about? And then trying to pull back and say, okay, what are the patterns that we find? And then once we find patterns, you can go to the next slide. What next one? What, I'm ultimately trying to do, this is not a model of teasing, but this was a thinking about interaction in human language and comparing it to interaction in animal communication. We're actually trying to do ultimately is to get some kind of model of the interaction. What is important? What are the animals, or in this case humans, paying attention to? And so this was something that I developed kind of as a schematic to illustrate the complexity. This wasn't meant to be every single thing that people take into account when they're communicating with another human, but it was meant to be paired with another simplified model in sort of visualizing how people think about animal communication versus human communication. And in this paper, I was actually showing that the relative simplicity of how we think about animal communication is problematic, because the model that we're going into asking questions about animal interaction constrains the type of questions we ask and the type of data we gather, and ultimately the types of conclusions that we can draw. So those were the things that I wanted to highlight. And thank you all so much for coming today.
Thank you so much, Erica. Very interesting line of research. And before we open the floor for questions, there's one more presentation by Peter Todd. And again, feel free to start asking questions via chat. And I think maybe some can also be answered via chat. Peter, I actually met first in Berlin, of all places. And then a little later, he moved to Indiana University, which is wonderful. I think he has been here, the director of the cognitive science program, and he has served in many other roles. He has a number of interesting books on cognitive search, evolution, algorithms, and the brain, together with Todd, with Hills and Robbins here by MIT Press in 2012. And he was also the first co-director of the IU Food Institute. How cool is it to have a food institute? And we still have that. And so in the interest of time, let me just give it over to Peter. And again, ideally, we have like a 10-minute presentation, and then we have time for discussion. But it's also really neat to learn more about your recent work. So please, Peter.
Thank you, Katy. I'm glad to be here too. I want to tell you all today a bit not about different types of intelligences, but rather about a particular key ability that I think goes across different types of intelligences. So a common form of intelligence that we see across many different types of organisms and other intelligent systems. Like Marlot, I very much see intelligence as being about acting in the world in appropriate ways. Also, that world includes our own internal worlds, for instance, of our memories and our ideas and plans, as we'll see in just a few minutes. In comparison to Erica's work, I'm going to start with talking about what individuals do to behave intelligently in the world in a particular way, and then end up at the end with some new directions that we're exploring, where we are looking at the interactions between individuals with different types of intelligences. And this actually also touches again on what Marlot presented as well. So these agents that exist in the world, they need stuff. So living things in particular, that we'll begin by focusing on, need matter and energy in order to continue to exist. And acting to find that stuff that they need in an efficient manner is a common aspect of intelligence. This typically involves search, moving around in the environment, trying to find resources that are needed, or in other words, exploring. And my main message today is that intelligence involves such exploration, including knowing when to do exploration to find new things, and also when not to explore, but rather to stick with what you've already got and make the best use of that. We humans spend much of our time and thought looking for the things that we need, searching and exploring. So, whoop, don't advance yet, please. Great. Perfect. And we do this, and so do many other types of animals and plants as well. They do exploration at a much slower rate than what we witness in animals, but roots growing towards water, leaves growing towards light is also a form of exploration. Even microbes and things happening in the gut microbiome, there is also exploration going on. And in fact, life without search is pretty boring. And that's what we can see in these sea pens, which are creatures that live on the bottom of the sea floor, and they don't move around, they don't explore, they just wait for the things that they need, food particles, to float past them, and then they catch them and digest them. So a very boring life, not very much intelligent behavior going on there at all. That actually hides one factor of their lives, which is when they are young, they are free swimming, and that's when they explore and they move around on the seafloor looking for where would be a good place to settle down, to get tenure, to live out the rest of their lives. So next slide, please. Bacteria also, yep, engage in a very simple form of search to find the stuff that they need, to find the food that they need. So they live in environments where there are food particles and those dissolve into the water around them. And in order to get close to where the food particles are, in order to be able to eat them, the bacteria adopt this very simple strategy that is called run and tumble. When they are not experiencing things improving, then they move, they run. When they are getting to a place where things are going to be better, then they tumble, they stay locally in that place, and they make use of the stuff that they are finding there. And this is a form of a win, stay, lose, shift strategy. So you keep doing what you're doing. If the things are good enough, that's the running, and you change what you're doing, or switch it up. In this case, shift if you're losing, if you're not getting the stuff that you need, and that's the tumbling. And this win, stay, lose, shift kind of strategy we'll see in other forms. It's a form of intelligence that gets used across many different kinds of organisms. Next slide, please. So we can see this, for instance, in birds that are looking for grubs that are hidden under the grass here. And the grubs are often found in patches locally spaced together. And so, Katy, if you try advancing, let's see what happens, because this also has animation in it. Okay, great. Just let that go. So when the bird is not encountering any grubs, it takes big steps. That's what you see at the bottom of the screen, moving around, sampling, see if there's any grubs under the grass here. If not, take another big step. If not, take another big step. But as soon as one of the red dots is found, one of the grubs, then the bird takes much smaller steps and stays in a local area looking for other grubs that are nearby. When it stops finding grubs there, then it switches back to exploring, to looking over a much wider area until it finds another patch of grubs. And if you advance again, Katy, I think it'll play forward. Yep. So there, the bird goes off and finds another patch of grubs, the red dots, and then will stay locally exploiting that patch as long as there are new grubs to be found. When there aren't any more there to find, it'll switch back to exploration, move off to look for another new patch. And all kinds of animals do this. We do this. Next slide, please. Like when we are looking for berries on bushes. Other animals, this is our dog Ludo. This is a more local example from Bloomington when we had a huge emergence of cicadas in 2021. Ludo got very good at exploring for patches of cicadas that would come up above the ground around trees, and then he would exploit that patch by eating them as much as he could until he was too full and had to go back home for a little lie down. So this brings up a different kind of search problem. Next slide, please. Which is when things are in patches, when the resources that you're looking for come in patches, we have to decide when to leave a patch, when to shift to exploring to find a new patch. And what we do in order to figure that out is think about how much is there left here of the resources that I could still find where I'm exploiting this current patch. How much am I likely to find somewhere else? And based on those two things, should I stay here, continue to exploit, or should I go and explore somewhere else? This is another win, stay, lose, shift kind of strategy. If I'm doing better here than I would moving on to somewhere else, then I'm winning and I should stay. If I'm not doing very well here anymore, I've eaten all the berries or all the cicadas that I can find easily, then it's time to shift and go somewhere else and find another patch. Next slide, please. So you might think, well, that's not what I do as a human when I'm being intelligent, but a lot of the kinds of search that we engage in also involves this kind of patchy structure to the environment, and people will stay in patches as long as they're good and then move on to find another patch when they're not so good. And we see that, for instance, in fishing. We set up an experiment in the lab where we had people fish in these artificial ponds, and when they detected that they were running out of fish in this pond, then they would decide to move on, find a new pond and fish there instead. Next slide. And colleagues of ours back in Berlin have been doing this in the real world, looking at ice fishing, where people are competing to catch as many fish as they can on frozen lakes, which is what's at the top of the slide here, and making their decision again. Should I stay or should I go? Should I continue exploiting where I am or should I explore for something new? And in this case, they are also using the information that they get socially by seeing what are the other people around me actually doing. So you might not think that still that sounds like intelligence in particular. It's just moving around the environment and finding stuff to eat. But we have found that people and other animals also use this kind of strategy for searching in our internal worlds when we are looking for memories or looking for ideas or looking for innovations. Next slide, please. You can see this in an example task, which I'll ask you to do now for 10 seconds. So name all the animals you can think of in 10 seconds. I'll pause. Start saying to yourself some animals that you can think of. Okay, that's enough. Next slide, please. So what people usually do in this task is think of animals and start saying them. And often people start with dog and cat. Katy, you can advance a few steps on here and arrows will appear. People might then say a guinea pig or a hamster or some other kind of pet, but then run out of things to say in terms of pets, and then pause for a minute and then explore and come across another kind of animal like farm animals, and then talk about chickens and goats and pigs and cows, and then run out of those and then have to explore again and then go on to sea animals and say some of those. So there also in our minds, we have these ideas and memories in patches, and people are applying the same kind of exploration, exploitation trade-off to navigate that kind of environment well too. And we think that this, next slide, kind of process where species on Earth have evolved from looking for food in the external environment that might be patchy to being able to apply those same strategies internally in searching in our minds, looking for ideas and memories. And we think that that is how life would evolve any place where it's evolving. And if we encounter extraterrestrial intelligence, we also think that that kind of exploration, exploitation trade-off would be used in their forms of thinking too. Finally, next slide, please. We've been looking at this in terms of another kind of intelligence, which is artificial intelligence, and looking to see not only how is search being used in AI systems, but more importantly, how can we leverage AI systems to help humans to do a better job of searching in their own minds, of searching for ideas and memories and innovations through collaborating with artificial intelligence systems. And this is new work that is just being sent off to journals, and where we are looking at having a person and an LLM say animals back and forth and see if we can get the LLM to help people to explore in their own minds in this same task that you just spent 10 seconds doing, and see if that will benefit them. It turns out when you have two people doing that, they actually interfere with each other and they explore less efficiently. But we're looking at ways that we can use and leverage artificial intelligence to help human intelligence to do a better job in this kind of a task. That's what I want to leave you with. Search and exploration is important for intelligence in individuals of many different kinds of species, and also in collaborating partnerships between different kinds of intelligences.
Thank you, Peter. This was great. And it also had visualizations of these exploration adventure tours. And I could
Exactly.
imagine that if AI just recommends new patches, right, then people will get great primers for new types of animals. So that should help. Whereas if two humans are competing or collaborating in this case, and they are trying to exhaust the same patches, right? Then they, of course, hurt each other more than helping each other.
That's right.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's see if we have questions from the audience. Otherwise, I have a question, of course. I was wondering, what's your favorite type of intelligence when it comes to knowledge foraging? Is it visual? And again, actually, if you're a lawyer, you probably are text-based. If you are a geographer or chemist, you might be visual-based. If you are, an artist, maybe you're motion-based. I don't know, but I would love to have your comments on if you're looking for the best information on a certain topic. What kind of intelligence would you actually use, and which kind of combination of intelligences? Because we learned about quite a few of those. And the exhibit, of course, tries to cover most of them.
I would use social intelligence. So I would do a search
Smart.
through the minds of other people that I think might have the insights, and try and get those insights in terms of examples from them.
And we do know about the power of networks at IU. We have a very strong network science community. And yes, asking smart people about what they think about a certain topic, or if they have a certain answer, that is very beneficial. Erica, Marlot, any comments from your end?
I think for me, I really have to do like a hands-on kind of like analogy of whatever it is I'm trying to understand. And I feel like if I can find an analogy of what I'm trying to learn about in a material form, and then I can, really play with it and take it apart or put it in different relationship with something else, then I feel like I know it in a different way than if I read about it.
So very essential, touchy
Yeah.
things. And we have seen that in science museums. They oftentimes try to have that experience in addition to having text and having visuals. But if you can actually touch and interact and build something or deconstruct something, I think that gives you a totally different understanding of a thing. And then Erica, I know there's research on cowbirds here at Indiana University, and they also looked at who is interacting with whom, right? Who is sitting with whom on a twig, who is teaching whom how to, I don't know, do food foraging, to behavior, social environment.
How to sing also.
Yeah, how to sing properly, yes, and how to behave to the other sex. I wonder if you have seen these evolving networks, and if this is something that you also do in your research, because ultimately you have these generational contracts, right, where maybe the older female birds in that case were helping a lot the younger male birds, at least in that one study I'm familiar with. And then you can draw these networks and you get to see who has what kind of teaching ability and who has what kind of other ability in terms of maybe being faster or stronger and otherwise being helpful as a young member of the community. And I really enjoy seeing that you are looking at not just human intelligence, but animal intelligence also.
Yeah, thanks, Katy. Yeah, I love, I assume this is like Drew and Meredith, Andrew King, Meredith West's, work on cowbirds, which, fun fact, I applied to IU to go to graduate school to work with them. So I almost was here as a grad student. But I think that work is super interesting. I will just kind of highlight that one of the, I think, interesting things, but also challenges of working in different species is that you really are sort of subject to some of the constraints of their life history. So working with great apes, it's very difficult to do studies that are that last multiple generations because their generation time is essentially the same as ours. So, if you're looking at birds or, insects or other animals, like you can have a generation every year or, multiple times a year. With great apes, we're talking about like 9 to 12 years in between generations. And so unless you're working with historical data, it's really difficult to build those longitudinal networks. What we often do with great apes is instead to build models looking at the sort of spread within a single generation of maybe a behavior that is innovated by one individual and look to see how it spreads socially. So there's a lot of social network analysis in great apes, as there is in humans, which, are another great ape. But the longitudinal studies, there are some done, but the data are difficult to get.
Yeah, I guess yeast is different, right? Much faster. Fruit flies, IU is the fruit fly hub. So there's a lot of really interesting research going on there. Maybe over time, Erica, you become also a fruit fly expert. Apparently that happens to many people which get hired at IU because it's just so easy to collaborate and engage doing fruit fly research. And we do have another panelist here. We have a cat, Tuck, I think is his name. And all are welcome. All intelligence is welcome. We are at the end of this panel, and we have a really cool next panel coming up. Marlot, you might like to stick around because we always wanted a brain interface to Amatria. And so you will get to see Amatria, which is a sentient architecture hanging in Luddy Hall. And so please do stay on, Marlot. Before we go over to the 2 p.m. session, Erica, Peter, Marlot, I hope you enjoyed each other and you will continue to talk to each other. This is part of what this event is also trying to do, not only introduce your work to a much larger audience, but also introduce you to each other. I would love to have some of those sculptures, Marlot, that you showed be on display in Luddy Hall. I think Andy will give you a tour in a moment. And we have a lot of science festivals and open houses here at IU. We have an intelligent systems engineering department, so it would fit extremely well. They typically do light pollution and other work. So again, you have the tides as an input medium. Here you could have light pollution or you could have radio waves going through the building as an input to what you typically can't perceive as a human being, but thanks to modern sensors, you could potentially make it understandable and feelable for the human body. So I think it would be super, super interesting to have you stay on and explore opportunities.